Right now, as you sit here listening, you may not realize it, but you are already practicing a form of wisdom that has been carried for thousands of years. You do not need to travel to a distant temple. You do not need to sit in perfect silence. And you do not need to transform yourself into someone else. The act of simply noticing this moment, of allowing yourself to be present, is the beginning of something powerful. Most people believe that spiritual practice requires complicated rituals or years of training. But what if the very life you are living holds the doorway to peace? Think of the moments you rarely value. Standing in line at the supermarket, waiting for the light to turn green, scrolling through your phone before bed. These are the kinds of ordinary situations that fill the lives of people everywhere in Europe, in Canada, in America, and yet hidden inside them is the same opportunity that monks have discovered in mountain monasteries. The chance to breathe, to notice, to let go. The wisdom of letting go is not an abstract teaching. It is a daily practice that can be lived by anyone who is willing to see what is already here. Let me share a small twist that might surprise you. The problem is not that your life is too busy, too noisy, or too full of demands. The problem is that you have been taught to believe peace exists only outside of those conditions. But imagine this. What if the stress of your job, the responsibilities of your family, the endless list of errands were not obstacles to your spiritual life, but the very material of it? Imagine that the frustration you feel while waiting in traffic could become as meaningful as time spent in meditation. Imagine that the way you hold your morning coffee, the way you respond to an impatient coworker, the way you listen to your child at the end of a long day could all be sacred practices. Tonight we begin a journey together that is both ancient and urgently modern. The world is more connected than ever before. We measure success by followers, by square footage, by titles, by the size of our bank accounts. Yet in the quiet hours of the night, many people still feel restless, empty, unsatisfied. That is why these teachings matter, because they remind us that true wealth, true power, true freedom are not measured in numbers. They are measured in our capacity to release what we do not need and to meet life as it is. So, as you listen, I invite you to settle into your chair or bed, to soften your shoulders, to take one slow breath. You do not have to become someone different. You do not have to perform or achieve. All you need is the willingness to be here, now, and to discover that letting go may give you more than holding on ever could. There is a story often told in Buddhist circles about a small monastery tucked away in the countryside of France. Families travel there every summer from all over the world, not to escape their busy lives, but to see them in a new light. These visitors arrive with their own ideas about what peace should look like. Some expect a retreat filled with silent meditation, free from the interruptions of daily life. Parents believe they must choose between caring for their children and cultivating inner calm. Workers believe they must leave their responsibilities behind if they want to find stillness. Yet the teachers in this monastery reveal a truth that upends those assumptions. They show that life itself is the practice. Every cry of a child, every pile of dishes, every moment stuck in traffic holds the same potential as a cushion in a meditation hall. One summer, a young mother came with her 2 children. She confessed to the teacher that she felt torn in two. She loved her children, but she also longed for silence and rest. The teacher simply smiled and said, "When your baby cries at midnight and you rise to comfort him, that is meditation. When you take a deep breath instead of snapping at your daughter's stubbornness, that is mindfulness." She looked at him, puzzled. "But isn't meditation supposed to be quiet?" He shook his head gently. True meditation is not about silence. It is about presence, and presence is available to you at any moment, even in the middle of chaos. This small exchange captures something profound. The ordinary rhythms of life do not block our path to peace. They are the path. When we shift our perspective, the things we thought were obstacles reveal themselves as opportunities. Every act of patience, every choice to breathe instead of react, every moment of awareness becomes part of the spiritual journey. Consider for a moment the routines you repeat without much thought. The dishes after breakfast, the morning commute, the endless list of emails that pile up at work. Most of us rush through these tasks in order to reach something we consider more important. But what if those tasks themselves are the practice? What if the warm water on your hands while you wash a plate is a reminder of life's simplicity? What if waiting at a red light is not wasted time but an invitation to pause, to feel the breath, to recognize that you are alive? In Zen teaching, there is a saying, "When you wash the bowl, wash the bowl." This simple phrase reminds us that peace comes not from escape, but from complete attention to the moment at hand. A man once shared his own discovery during a retreat. He was a middle-aged office worker who felt suffocated by his 9-to-5 routine. He imagined that peace could only be found in distant mountains, far from deadlines and office politics. But during his time in the monastery, he was assigned the task of sweeping the dining hall each morning. At first, he treated it as a chore. He rushed, his mind filled with thoughts of what he would rather be doing. Then one day he slowed down. He noticed the rhythm of the broom against the floor. He heard the soft sound of dust gathering. He felt his body moving in harmony with the task. In that moment, sweeping was no longer a burden. It was meditation. When he returned to his office job, he carried this awareness with him. Even while typing emails, he could feel the same sense of presence. He realized it was never the environment that determined his peace, but the way he met each moment. In our modern world, especially in the West, people often divide life into categories: work versus rest, family versus personal growth, spirituality versus responsibility. This division creates constant tension, as if we must always choose one and sacrifice the other. But Buddhist wisdom dissolves these divisions. It says, wash dishes with mindfulness, and that becomes prayer. Comfort a crying child with patience, and that becomes meditation. Answer an email with clarity and kindness, and that becomes spiritual training. The point is not what you are doing, but how you are doing it. Every ordinary task becomes a doorway to extraordinary peace when you approach it with awareness. Think of the many places where this shift could transform your day. You might be driving to work, stuck in traffic that seems endless. Normally, frustration builds. Your mind races with complaints. But what if you use that time to notice your breath, to feel the steering wheel beneath your hands, to recognize the sky above the crowded highway? The traffic does not change, but your relationship to it does. Instead of losing energy in irritation, you discover a quiet strength in acceptance. Or imagine standing in line at a crowded grocery store. You glance at your phone, impatient, eager to be anywhere else. But what if you choose to notice the people around you? The elderly man counting his coins, the child tugging at his mother's sleeve, the cashier repeating the same words for the 100th time that day. In that observation, a small miracle occurs. You realize that everyone is carrying their own burdens, their own stories. Compassion naturally arises, and what was once an annoyance becomes a moment of connection. Even technology, often blamed for our restlessness, can become a practice. When you reach for your phone, instead of diving straight into social media, you can pause and ask yourself why. Am I reaching for distraction, for comfort, for connection? By noticing the impulse, you create a space between stimulus and response. That space is freedom. In that pause, even a device that usually scatters your attention can remind you to return to yourself. The heart of this teaching is not about adding anything new to your life. It is not about squeezing meditation into your schedule as another obligation. It is about seeing your schedule itself as meditation. The laundry, the commute, the meetings, the bedtime routine, all of it is practice. When met with presence, this is radical because it removes the excuses we often use. We no longer have to wait for the weekend retreat or the quiet morning. Peace is available on a busy Tuesday afternoon. In the middle of the rush, if we are willing to notice it. The families in the French monastery discovered this truth in their own way. At first, they thought they had to put their children aside to practice, but gradually they saw that their children were their teachers. A toddler's tantrum became a lesson in patience. A shared meal became an opportunity to practice gratitude. A bedtime story became a meditation on love. They realized that spiritual life and family life are not separate paths but one. By embracing the messiness of daily life instead of resisting it, they discovered a deeper peace than silence could ever provide. For audiences in Europe, America, and Canada, this message resonates deeply because modern life is busier and more fragmented than ever. People are searching for ways to balance work, family, and personal well-being. The promise of this teaching is not escape, but integration. It says you do not need to run away to find peace. You can find it here, in your own home, your own workplace, your own community. You can begin tonight by washing one dish with full attention or by listening to one person without distraction. Small acts of presence ripple outward, transforming not just your inner world, but the atmosphere around you. This is why everyday life can be called a hidden monastery. The teachers are not distant monks, but the people and situations you meet each day. The curriculum is not ancient scriptures, but the moments of frustration, joy, and routine that shape your hours. The exam is not written on paper, but lived in how you respond when life does not go according to plan. And the reward is not a certificate, but the discovery that peace has been available all along. By recognizing that life itself is the practice, you begin to carry a different energy. You become less reactive and more responsive. You find strength not by controlling circumstances, but by meeting them with awareness. And slowly, almost without noticing, you begin to embody the very qualities you once thought belonged only to monks and masters. Patience, compassion, clarity, resilience. These qualities grow naturally when you stop treating daily life as an obstacle and start treating it as the path. When people first hear the phrase spiritual power, they often imagine something mysterious or supernatural. They might picture miracles, visions, or abilities that belong only to saints and sages. But in Buddhist wisdom, spiritual power is something much more practical and profoundly human. It is not about control over others or extraordinary feats. It is about cultivating qualities that give you true freedom in the middle of everyday life. These powers are not meant to make you different from other people. They are meant to make you more fully yourself. They are called compassion, wisdom, and the power of letting go. Let us begin with compassion. Many in the modern world hear the word compassion and think of weakness or self-sacrifice. They imagine compassion as allowing others to walk over you or constantly putting yourself last. But in Buddhist teaching, compassion is not passive. It is steady, strong, and enduring, like a fire that continues to burn, no matter how many torches are lit from it. Real compassion does not mean solving everyone's problems or carrying their burdens for them. It means being fully present with them in their suffering and in their joy. It means offering the kind of presence that makes another person feel seen and understood. Think about someone in your life who has this effect on you. Maybe it is a friend who never interrupts when you speak, or a grandparent who listens with full attention. That quality of deep presence is compassion. It does not fix or change circumstances, but it creates the space in which healing can occur. Compassion is also not limited to others. One of the hardest but most necessary forms of compassion is directed toward ourselves. In the West, especially in North America and Europe, many people grow up believing that being critical of themselves will drive improvement. They think harshness will make them stronger. In truth, self-judgment usually builds shame and fear. Compassion toward oneself creates the safe environment in which growth naturally unfolds. It allows us to learn from mistakes rather than being crushed by them. The second spiritual power is wisdom. Unlike intelligence or knowledge, wisdom is not about how many facts you know or how many books you have read. It is about clarity. It is the ability to see through the fog of confusion and emotion that so often clouds our decisions. Wisdom allows you to recognize the difference between reality and the stories your mind tells about reality. Everyone knows the experience of receiving a short email from a boss or a text that goes unanswered. Instantly, the mind begins to invent stories. Perhaps my boss is unhappy with me. Perhaps my friend is angry. Hours or even days can be wasted in anxiety over these imagined problems. Wisdom interrupts this cycle. It reminds us that thoughts are not facts. It helps us recognize our assumptions for what they are, stories, not truth. In daily life, wisdom also means perspective. It is the ability to recognize that the problem that feels overwhelming today may look very small in a week. It is the power to step back in the moment rather than only realizing later that we overreacted. Imagine the freedom that comes from having perspective while the challenge is unfolding. Not only in hindsight, Wisdom also reveals itself in the way we see long-term consequences. A wise person pauses before speaking words that might wound, not because they are suppressing anger, but because they can already see the ripple effects of those words. Wisdom is not distant or cold. It is clear, steady, and deeply practical. Now we come to the third spiritual power, and it is perhaps the most challenging and transformative of all. It is the power of letting go. Our culture teaches that strength comes from holding on, from accumulating more, from always striving upward. We are told that security lies in possessions, achievements, and recognition. The power of letting go turns this message upside down. It teaches that freedom often comes not from gaining, but from releasing. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack filled with stones. You have been told these stones are valuable, but they weigh you down. One day you set the pack down and realize the relief is worth more than the contents. That is the essence of letting go. Letting go does not mean neglecting responsibilities or abandoning people. It means recognizing what is unnecessary and releasing it. It means noticing when your identity is tied too tightly to your job title, your reputation, or your possessions, and loosening that grip. In many Western countries, people work tirelessly to climb career ladders, only to discover that each promotion brings more stress and less freedom. Letting go in this context may mean loosening the belief that your worth is measured by your role or your income. It may mean choosing authenticity over image, or peace over constant achievement. The three powers are not separate paths. They weave together and support one another. Compassion without wisdom can become sentimentality. Wisdom without compassion can become cold detachment. Letting go without compassion and wisdom can become careless avoidance. But when they are practiced together, they create a life of balance and freedom. Compassion makes us tender, wisdom makes us clear, and letting go makes us free. Together they shape a person who is steady in the face of storms. To understand how these powers work in practice, imagine a parent facing the daily chaos of raising children. Compassion allows the parent to meet a child's tantrum with patience rather than irritation. Wisdom allows the parent to recognize that the tantrum is not a personal attack but a natural stage of development. Letting go allows the parent to release unrealistic expectations of perfect behavior and embrace the moment as it is. The result is not only a calmer parent but also a child who feels secure and understood. The three powers transform ordinary family life into a training ground for peace. Now imagine a workplace filled with competition and stress. One employee chooses to practice the three powers. Compassion allows them to support colleagues rather than seeing them only as rivals. Wisdom allows them to step back from drama and focus on what truly matters. Letting go allows them to release the need to win every battle or receive constant recognition. Such a person becomes a quiet leader, not through authority or fear, but through presence and integrity. Others feel calmer around them. Decisions become clearer. Conflicts lose some of their heat. This is the impact of spiritual power in the modern world. In our digital age, these powers are perhaps more needed than ever. Social media encourages comparison, judgment, and constant grasping for attention. Practicing compassion online might mean pausing before posting a harsh comment and remembering there is a human being on the other side of the screen. Practicing wisdom online might mean recognizing that the curated images we see are not the full truth of anyone's life. Practicing letting go online might mean sharing without obsessing over likes, or choosing to put the phone down when scrolling no longer serves us. In these simple ways, the three powers become tools for surviving and even thriving in a digital landscape that often leaves people feeling empty. The beauty of these powers is that they do not require perfect conditions. You do not need to retreat from the world to practice them. In fact, the busier and more demanding your life is, the more opportunities you have to develop them. Each moment of irritation can become a practice of compassion. Each moment of confusion can become a practice of wisdom. Each moment of grasping can become a practice of letting go. Life itself provides the training ground. Perhaps the most important reminder is that these powers are not achievements to check off a list. They are living qualities that grow stronger the more you use them. Compassion grows each time you choose kindness. Wisdom grows each time you pause and see clearly. Letting go grows each time you release something unnecessary. They do not run out. The more you practice, the more abundant they become. For audiences in Europe, Canada, and America, the appeal of these powers lies in their practicality. They do not require adopting a foreign culture or religious identity. They require only a willingness to meet life differently. A parent in Toronto, a student in Berlin, a business leader in New York can all discover the same freedom in their daily tasks. These powers belong to no single culture. They are human capacities waiting to be awakened. In the end, the three spiritual powers are not about changing who you are, but about uncovering what has been there all along. Compassion reminds you of your natural capacity to care. Wisdom reminds you of your natural capacity to see clearly. Letting go reminds you of your natural capacity to be free. When combined, they create a life not dependent on circumstances for peace, but rooted in peace itself. And that is the kind of power that no one can take away. Modern traps of accumulation and the culture of more. The world we live in today is filled with the promise of more choices, more opportunities, more connections, more achievements. On the surface, this seems like a blessing. After all, who would not want more success, more possessions, more recognition? Yet the teachings of Buddhism remind us that the obsession with more is not always a gift. In fact, it is often the very thing that keeps us restless and dissatisfied. We live in societies where the measure of a good life is often determined by what we accumulate. This creates a culture of constant striving, one where the horizon of satisfaction keeps moving further away each time we reach it. Consider how this plays out in modern consumer life. A new phone is released every year, and lines stretch around the block as people wait for the latest model. The phone they already own works perfectly well, yet the allure of something new convinces them that happiness lies in upgrading. The excitement is real but short-lived. Within weeks, the device becomes ordinary, and the hunger for the next upgrade begins again. This is not limited to technology. Fashion cycles push us to replace clothes that are still in good condition. Advertisements convince us that our kitchens, cars, and homes are inadequate unless they match the latest trends. The result is a constant cycle of desire and disappointment. Accumulation also extends to the realm of status and identity. In workplaces across Europe, Canada, and America, careers are often pursued as ladders to climb. Each rung promises more authority, more respect, more financial security. Yet many who reach higher levels find themselves burdened with greater stress and less freedom. They discover that the external signs of success do not always bring internal peace. Instead, they create a fragile identity that must constantly be defended. If your worth is tied to your title, what happens when the title changes? If your sense of security is tied to your income, what happens when the economy shifts? The trap of accumulation is that it always requires more to feel safe. Yet the more you have, the more you fear losing. Education and self-improvement can also become a form of accumulation. Many students and professionals in the West collect degrees, certifications, and training programs, not only for learning, but for the identity those achievements create. There is nothing wrong with education, but when it becomes a race to collect credentials for the sake of status, it can leave people feeling emptier than before. Instead of learning to grow, they learn to compare. Their shelves are filled with diplomas, but their hearts remain unsettled. Even relationships can fall into this trap. Social media encourages us to count friends, followers, and likes as if they were measures of genuine connection. People post carefully crafted images, chasing approval from strangers while neglecting the real relationships around them. The result is often more disconnection, not less. We accumulate digital recognition but lose the intimacy of true presence. This culture of more pushes us to believe that happiness depends on numbers, the number of followers, the size of a house, the digits in a bank account. Yet when we reach those numbers, the satisfaction fades quickly, and we are pushed toward the next goal. This endless chase has deep psychological costs. Anxiety rises because the bar is never stable. Depression grows because the promise of satisfaction is constantly deferred. Restlessness becomes normal because the mind is trained to look forward to the next thing rather than rest in the present. Families feel the weight, as parents work longer hours to provide more, while children quietly crave attention and presence more than possessions. Communities fracture as competition replaces cooperation, and people view neighbors as rivals in the race to accumulate. Buddhism offers a radical perspective in the face of this culture. It suggests that true wealth does not come from what we add but from what we release. It challenges the assumption that more equals better. Imagine a room so cluttered with furniture and boxes that you cannot move freely. The instinct might be to buy new shelves or organizers, but the real solution is to remove what is unnecessary. The same is true of the mind. The problem is not always that we lack something. The problem is often that we are carrying too much. Letting go creates space, and in that space, peace arises. Take, for example, the story of a young professional who worked tirelessly in a major city. He earned a high salary, had a modern apartment, and enjoyed the admiration of his peers. Yet he was exhausted, sleeping little, and constantly worried about maintaining his image. One evening he was asked a simple question: what could you release right now that would make your life lighter? The question stayed with him. Slowly he began to notice small attachments he could let go of. He stopped checking emails after midnight. He sold clothes he never wore. He learned to say no to social events that drained him. Each act of release brought a surprising relief. He realized that the joy he had been chasing through accumulation was hidden beneath the weight of his own excess. The culture of more also thrives on comparison. People measure their worth not by their own lives but by the lives of others. Social media intensifies this, as every scroll reveals someone seemingly happier, wealthier, or more successful. Yet Buddhist wisdom reminds us that comparison is a trap. The truth is that every life contains suffering and joy. No one's story is as simple as the image they present. When we let go of comparison, we reclaim our ability to live authentically. We stop chasing someone else's dream and begin to honor our own path. One of the profound lessons of Buddhist teaching is that accumulation often brings the opposite of what it promises. More possessions bring more worry about maintenance and loss. More achievements bring more pressure to maintain status. More relationships online bring more shallow connections and loneliness. What looks like security from the outside can feel like a beautiful prison from the inside. The walls may be decorated with success, but the spirit feels confined. The alternative is not poverty or neglect. The alternative is clarity. It is recognizing what truly matters and what does not. It is learning to distinguish between needs and endless wants. Needs are simple: food, shelter, love, connection, purpose. Wants are infinite and often fleeting. The wisdom of letting go is not about denying all wants, but about holding them lightly. It means enjoying what comes without clinging and releasing what no longer serves. In this way, letting go becomes the key to genuine freedom. For audiences in the modern West, this teaching resonates because many are discovering the limits of accumulation. Minimalism movements in Europe, lifestyle changes in Canada, and wellness practices in America all point to a growing hunger for simplicity. People are realizing that happiness cannot be bought or stored in closets. They are learning that peace comes from subtraction, not addition. Buddhism speaks directly to this hunger, offering not just a trend, but a timeless wisdom. Imagine how different life could be if we shifted our measure of success. Instead of asking how much we own, we could ask how much freedom we feel. Instead of asking how high we have climbed, we could ask how deeply we are at peace. Instead of striving endlessly for more, we could learn to honor enough. This is not about rejecting ambition or goals. It is about ensuring that our pursuit of them does not imprison us. It is about remembering that life is not a race to the finish line of accumulation, but a journey of presence and awareness. The culture of more is strong, but each small act of letting go weakens its hold. Choosing to value time with loved ones over extra hours at work. Choosing to enjoy the phone you already have, instead of chasing the next release. Choosing to speak honestly instead of carefully managing your image. These are acts of rebellion against a culture that insists you are never enough. Each act declares that you already have what you need to experience peace. In the end, the modern traps of accumulation are powerful, because they appeal to real human desires for security, recognition, and comfort. But when those desires become endless, they become chains. The path of letting go does not deny those desires. It acknowledges them and then offers a deeper fulfillment. It teaches that real security comes not from possessions but from resilience. Real recognition comes not from applause but from authenticity. Real comfort comes not from luxury but from contentment. When we release the constant demand for more, we discover that enough was here all along. And in that discovery lies a freedom greater than any possession could provide. The three poisons: craving, anger, and ignorance. Buddhist wisdom teaches that the greatest obstacles to peace are not found outside of us, but within. They are called the three poisons because they seep quietly into the mind and contaminate our ability to see clearly and to live freely. These poisons are craving, anger, and ignorance. They do not need to be dramatic to cause suffering. In fact, they are most dangerous when they appear in subtle ways, woven into the fabric of everyday life. By learning to recognize them, we begin to loosen their grip. By practicing awareness, we create the conditions for compassion, wisdom, and letting go to flourish. The first poison is craving. It is easy to think of craving only in terms of obvious addictions or strong desires, but it is much more subtle. Craving arises any time the mind reaches for something different from what is here in the present moment. It might be craving a different mood, a different response from someone, or a different outcome to a situation. Imagine sitting at dinner and wishing the food tasted just a little better, or checking your phone because you cannot bear a moment of quiet, or wishing your co-worker were friendlier. None of these desires are extreme, yet together they create a constant background of dissatisfaction. There is a story told at a monastery where families come to learn the practice of mindfulness. One summer, the community received a donation of new yellow chairs for their dining hall. These chairs were brighter and newer than the old ones, though they were not really more comfortable. Without realizing it, people began arriving earlier to claim the yellow chairs. Families gathered them together and then added a few older chairs to disguise the preference. No one fought or argued. Yet the subtle grasping was clear. The chairs had become symbols of something better, and the craving to have them disrupted the very practice of contentment the community had come to learn. In modern life, the yellow chair takes many forms. It is the faster moving line at the grocery store, the new gadget everyone is buying, the job title that seems just out of reach. Craving does not always roar like a fire. More often it hums quietly like background noise, always suggesting that things could be just a little different, just a little better. The trouble is that this craving never ends. The moment one desire is satisfied, another appears. The mind that is trained to crave will always find something to crave, and peace remains out of reach. The second poison is anger. Again, this is not only the anger of shouting or fighting. Anger appears whenever the mind pushes against reality, whenever we resist what is happening. It can show up as irritation when traffic is slow, as frustration when technology fails, or as disappointment when plans fall apart. Anger is often the shadow of craving. When we do not get what we want, anger arises. When the yellow chair is not available, anger surfaces toward the person sitting in it. When meditation is not peaceful, anger appears toward the thoughts that disturb us. Anger also turns inward. Many people in the West are familiar with the anger of self-judgment. We become angry at ourselves for not being productive enough, attractive enough, successful enough. We scold ourselves for failing to meet impossible standards. This internal anger can be even more destructive than outward anger because it erodes confidence and joy from within. Some call it spiritual anger when we turn frustration toward our own progress. We feel discouraged that our practice is not deep enough, that our minds are still restless, that our emotions still get the best of us. This anger at ourselves becomes yet another obstacle to peace. The Buddha compared anger to holding a hot coal with the intention of throwing it at someone else. The first person to get burned is always the one holding the coal. In the same way, each moment spent resisting what has already happened is a moment stolen from peace. Anger does not change the past, but it robs us of the present. The practice is not to eliminate anger by force, but to recognize it as it arises. When irritation appears, we can pause and ask, what is this anger trying to protect? What expectation did I have that reality did not meet? With curiosity, anger loses its power to control us, and sometimes it even reveals information about what we truly value. The third poison is ignorance. In Buddhist teaching, ignorance is not about lack of education or knowledge. It is about not seeing clearly. It is the confusion that makes us mistake our thoughts for facts, our emotions for emergencies, and our opinions for absolute truth. Ignorance shows up when we take our worries about the future as certain predictions. It appears when we assume another person's behavior is entirely about us. It arises when we believe our current perspective is the only possible way to view a situation. Perhaps the most common form of ignorance is failing to distinguish between direct experience and interpretation. Imagine someone does not respond to your text. The direct experience is simple: no response. Ignorance turns this into a story. They must be angry. They must be ignoring me. They must not value me. These stories create anxiety and hurt, even though they may have nothing to do with reality. Ignorance is like a fog that prevents us from seeing what is actually here. It convinces us that our interpretations are truth and blinds us to other possibilities. The three poisons often work together. Craving reaches for what is not here. When it is not satisfied, anger pushes against what is here. Ignorance fuels the cycle by convincing us that our stories about the situation are the absolute truth. Together, they create a pattern of suffering that repeats endlessly. We crave more success, grow angry when it does not come, and believe the story that we are failures. We crave perfect relationships, grow angry at imperfections, and believe the story that we are unlovable. The cycle feeds itself until we learn to see it clearly. Awareness is the antidote. When we notice craving without being consumed by it, we loosen its hold. When we observe anger with curiosity instead of reacting, we create space for wiser responses. When we recognize ignorance for what it is, we step out of the fog and into clarity. None of this requires perfection. It only requires practice. The simple act of seeing the poison is already a form of medicine. For people in modern Western societies, the three poisons are everywhere. Advertising cultivates craving by convincing us we need more. Politics and media often stoke anger to keep us engaged. Social platforms spread ignorance by blurring fact and opinion. It is no wonder that anxiety and division run high. Yet, within this landscape, the practice of awareness becomes even more powerful. Each time we refuse to let craving dictate our actions, we reclaim freedom. Each time we soften anger with understanding, we protect peace. Each time we challenge ignorance with clarity, we strengthen wisdom. Imagine a parent noticing their child's tantrum. Craving might wish for a perfectly behaved child. Anger might push against the noise and disruption. Ignorance might turn the moment into a story about being a bad parent. But awareness can shift the entire scene. The parent breathes, lets go of the craving for perfection, acknowledges the frustration without acting on it, and remembers that the tantrum is a natural part of growth. The poisons lose their grip, and what remains is patience and care. Or imagine an employee overlooked for a promotion. Craving wanted recognition. Anger lashes out at colleagues or bosses. Ignorance creates the story that they are worthless. Yet awareness interrupts this chain. The employee acknowledges disappointment, releases the need to define worth by a title, and looks clearly at the situation. Perhaps the promotion went to someone more suited for that role. Perhaps another opportunity will come. What seemed like a crushing defeat becomes a chance to practice freedom. The three poisons are ancient in origin, but timeless in relevance. They arise in monasteries and in modern offices, in quiet villages and in bustling cities. No culture is immune, and no individual is free of them. But each moment offers the chance to recognize and transform them. We do not need to conquer craving once and for all. We only need to notice when it arises and choose differently. We do not need to eliminate anger completely. We only need to pause before it controls us. We do not need to become all-knowing. We only need to see that our thoughts are not always truth. By practicing this awareness, life itself becomes the training ground. Each craving becomes a chance to practice contentment. Each moment of anger becomes a chance to practice patience. Each confusion becomes a chance to practice clarity. Slowly, these small choices accumulate, and the poisons that once dictated our reactions lose their power. The mind grows lighter, the heart grows steadier, and the spirit grows freer. Lessons of possession and ego, when ownership becomes attachment. If the three poisons of craving, anger, and ignorance weave suffering into the fabric of our days, then one of the most subtle threads is attachment to possession and identity. Human beings are natural collectors. From the time we are children, we gather toys, trinkets, and treasures that feel like extensions of who we are. As we grow, those possessions may change into homes, cars, jewelry, or technology, but the underlying psychology remains the same. We believe that what we own says something about our value. Slowly, without realizing it, our sense of self fuses with the objects around us. There is a simple story told in one Zen monastery about the gift of small bells. A group of new monks was given bells to use during chanting. Each bell was nearly identical, but to make them easier to identify, the teacher wrote the name of each monk on the inside rim. Almost immediately, subtle competition appeared. Some monks began polishing their bells more than others. Some felt pride in the sound their bell made, while others felt disappointed if theirs sounded dull. The object itself had not changed. It was the same piece of metal, the same tone of sound. But once a name was attached, possession entered the picture. The bell was no longer just a bell. It became my bell. With that identity came preference, comparison, and tension. This small story reveals something essential. We do not merely own objects. We allow them to own us. A simple mug is just a mug until it becomes my mug. A car is just a tool until it becomes my car. An opinion is just a thought until it becomes my opinion. Once possession attaches to identity, the stakes rise. We feel pride when the object is admired, and pain when it is criticized or lost. Our peace becomes tied to things outside our control. Modern life intensifies this attachment. People invest enormous energy into curating personal images through clothes, gadgets, and even digital profiles. Social media amplifies the sense that we must constantly manage our appearance, both physical and psychological. A pair of shoes becomes more than footwear. It becomes a statement about status. A vacation becomes more than rest. It becomes a symbol to display online. Identity fuses with possession in ways our ancestors could not have imagined. This attachment is not limited to material goods. We also cling to roles and labels. Someone might define themselves as a successful executive, a devoted parent, a creative artist, or a loyal friend. These roles can be meaningful, but when we hold them too tightly, they limit us. The danger lies not in the role itself, but in mistaking the role for the whole self. If your worth is bound to being an executive, what happens when the company fails? If your identity rests entirely on being a parent, what happens when children grow independent? If you define yourself by success, what happens in times of failure? When the role shifts, as all roles eventually do, the self feels shattered. In Buddhism, this tendency is sometimes described as clinging to the self-image. We are not only attached to objects and roles, but to the story of who we think we are. We protect our opinions as if they were treasures. We defend our reputations as if they were life itself. In truth, opinions shift, reputations fade, and stories change. Yet we treat them as permanent, building walls around them and reacting fiercely when they are threatened. This is why so many arguments in relationships or politics become so heated. It is not just the idea that is challenged, it is the sense of self attached to that idea. Consider how this plays out in daily life. Imagine two colleagues debating a project at work. One proposes a strategy, the other disagrees. If neither is deeply attached, the discussion can remain respectful and constructive. But if one identifies with the proposal as my idea, then disagreement feels like rejection of the self. Defensiveness rises, tempers flare, and conflict escalates. What began as a conversation about strategy becomes a battle of egos. The attachment to ownership, in this case of an idea, poisons the interaction. The same pattern appears in families. A parent may cling to the belief that their child must follow a particular path. The desire is not only for the child's success, but for the parent's identity as a good guide. When the child chooses differently, the parent feels not only disappointment but personal failure. Attachment to the role of wise parent blinds them to the unique journey of their child. What could have been a relationship of support becomes strained under the weight of ownership. Letting go of this attachment does not mean abandoning responsibility or ceasing to care. It means loosening the grip of identity. It means recognizing that objects are useful but not defining, that roles are important but not permanent, that opinions are meaningful but not absolute. When we release the need to fuse self with possession, we rediscover freedom. A bell becomes a bell again. A car becomes a car. An opinion becomes a thought. They are part of life, but they do not dictate our worth. There is a modern story that illustrates this beautifully. A successful technology entrepreneur reached the height of wealth and influence. His name was attached to a company admired around the world, yet he felt increasingly imprisoned by his own creation. Every decision was scrutinized. Every mistake felt like a public wound. One day he chose to step away, selling most of his shares and leaving the daily operations. Friends thought he was crazy to walk away from such power and wealth, but he described the experience as a profound relief. For the first time in years, he felt light. He said, "I realized I had not been living with a company. The company had been living inside me. By releasing it, I found myself again." His story echoes the truth that possessions and roles can become cages. Only by letting go could he rediscover freedom. For people in modern Western societies, this teaching is particularly relevant. From childhood, people are taught to pursue ownership as a sign of maturity. Own your room, your car, your home, your brand. Culture celebrates those who accumulate, who label, who define themselves clearly. Yet the shadow side is rarely acknowledged. Each possession, each label, each role becomes another weight on the identity we carry. The question is not whether possessions or roles are bad. The question is whether we can hold them without letting them define us. In practice, loosening attachment begins with awareness. The next time you feel anger when someone challenges your opinion, pause and notice whether you are defending the idea or defending the self. The next time you feel jealousy at another person's success, notice whether you are comparing objects or comparing identities. The next time you feel anxiety about losing something, ask yourself whether the fear is about the loss of the object or the loss of who you think you are. These reflections create cracks in the armor of possession, allowing space for freedom to grow. When we loosen attachment, relationships also transform without the need to defend ego. We can listen more openly without the need to control outcomes. We can support others with genuine care without the need to cling to objects. We can enjoy them more fully in the moment. Paradoxically, by holding things lightly, we can appreciate them more deeply. A favorite cup is enjoyed while it lasts, without fear of breakage. A role is embraced while it serves, without despair when it changes. An opinion is expressed clearly, without the need to win every argument. In the end, the lesson of possession and ego is simple but profound. What we own is not the problem. How tightly we cling is the problem. When ownership fuses with identity, peace is lost. When we remember that objects and roles are impermanent, we reclaim freedom. We can still care, still work, still build, but we do so with an open hand instead of a clenched fist. The bell rings clearly when it is struck, whether or not our name is written on it. Our lives ring clearly when we release the weight of possession and live from the freedom of presence. A story of renunciation, freedom through simplicity. Throughout history, there have been countless stories of men and women who discovered that freedom does not come from accumulation but from renunciation. These stories remind us that letting go is not about losing, but about gaining something far greater. One such story, set not in ancient times but in our own modern era, illustrates this truth in a way that resonates deeply with audiences across Europe, Canada, and America today. In a busy city filled with skyscrapers and constant noise, lived a man named Daniel. He had built a career in the technology industry, co-founding a company that grew rapidly and brought him enormous wealth. His name appeared regularly in newspapers and on television. Investors celebrated him, employees admired him, and friends envied his success. On the outside, his life looked perfect. He owned a penthouse apartment with glass walls that overlooked the skyline. He traveled in private jets, wore expensive suits, and attended exclusive gatherings. Yet inside, Daniel felt increasingly empty. The very things that once excited him had become burdens. His possessions required constant maintenance. His reputation required endless defense, and his schedule left no room for peace. One evening, exhausted after another day of back-to-back meetings, Daniel stood alone in his apartment and looked out at the city lights. For the first time, he admitted to himself that he was not happy. In fact, he felt imprisoned. His wealth had become a golden cage. His success had turned into a chain. He asked himself a question that startled him. If I let it all go, what would remain? That question became the seed of transformation. Over the next months, Daniel began to experiment with renunciation. At first, he made small changes. He sold his luxury car and replaced it with a simple bicycle. He found unexpected joy in riding through the city streets, feeling the wind on his face. He gave away clothes he never wore and realized how little he actually needed to feel comfortable. He began spending less time at parties and more time walking in parks, noticing the seasons change. Each act of letting go brought a sense of relief. Instead of feeling poorer, he felt richer in time, in clarity, in presence. Eventually, Daniel made a radical decision. He sold his share of the company, donated much of his wealth to charities, and moved to a modest cabin near the forest. Friends thought he had lost his mind. They could not understand why someone would walk away from such success. But Daniel explained that for the first time he felt free. He no longer carried the constant weight of managing an empire or defending an image. He woke with the sunrise, grew vegetables in a small garden, and spent afternoons reading and writing. He discovered joy in simplicity. He said, "I used to think I was living inside my company, but in truth, the company was living inside me. By letting it go, I finally found myself again." This modern story mirrors countless examples throughout history. From monks who left palaces to live in monasteries to artists who abandoned fame for authenticity. The pattern is clear. Renunciation does not have to mean abandoning all responsibilities or living in poverty. It means releasing the grip of what no longer serves the spirit. It means daring to step away from the culture of more and choosing the path of enough. The lesson of Daniel's journey is not that everyone must sell their possessions or leave their careers. It is that each of us carries unnecessary weight, and freedom begins when we set it down. For some, it may mean leaving a job that drains the soul. For others, it may mean ending a toxic relationship, reducing digital distractions, or letting go of the constant drive for perfection. Each act of release opens space for something more authentic to emerge. In Western societies, where success is often measured by accumulation, stories of renunciation strike a deep chord. Many people secretly long for simplicity but feel trapped by obligations, expectations, or fear. They imagine that letting go means failure, when in truth it can mean liberation. Renunciation is not a punishment, but a return to wholeness. It allows us to rediscover what really matters: health, connection, presence, and peace. Renunciation also teaches us to see value differently. In the old mindset, value is measured in dollars, square footage, or recognition. In the new mindset, value is measured in freedom of time, in clarity of mind, in depth of relationship. A modest meal shared with friends can bring more satisfaction than a feast consumed in loneliness. A walk in the woods can restore the spirit more than a luxury vacation planned for appearances. When we let go of the obsession with more, we discover treasures hidden in plain sight. Another dimension of renunciation is spiritual. Letting go of possessions is one layer, but letting go of ego is even deeper. Daniel realized that much of his suffering did not come from the objects he owned, but from the identity he had built around being a successful entrepreneur. He was attached to the story of being admired, of being a leader, of being someone who mattered in the eyes of others. When he released that story, he found peace not only in his lifestyle but in his heart. He no longer needed applause to feel worthy. He no longer needed constant achievement to feel alive. His worth was no longer tied to external validation, but to the simple fact of being. For those in North America and Europe, this lesson is vital. Many live in cultures where identity is closely tied to careers, roles, and reputations. The fear of losing these identities creates enormous stress. Renunciation in this context means loosening the grip on these labels. You can still work, still parent, still create, but without making those roles the entirety of who you are. Freedom comes when you realize you are more than your job title, more than your possessions, more than your reputation. The practice of renunciation does not have to be dramatic. It can begin with small steps. You might clear out a closet and notice the lightness it brings. You might turn off your phone for an evening and feel the freedom of silence. You might let go of a long-held grudge and notice the space it creates in your heart. Each step is a form of renunciation, a way of saying, I will no longer carry what I do not need. Over time, these small acts build into a profound transformation. The paradox of renunciation is that by giving up what we thought we needed, we discover what we truly need. Daniel gave up wealth and status, but he gained presence, authenticity, and joy. A monk gives up comfort and luxury but gains clarity and peace. A parent gives up the illusion of control but gains a deeper bond with their child. Renunciation is never about loss alone. It is about exchange. We release what burdens us to make room for what nourishes us. In a world overwhelmed by accumulation, renunciation is a quiet revolution. It challenges the assumptions that govern modern life. It asks us to reconsider what success really means. It dares us to measure wealth not by what we possess, but by how free we feel. For audiences in America, Canada, and Europe, this is not an abstract philosophy. It is an urgent invitation. The culture of more is exhausting people, and stories like Daniel's offer an alternative. They show that it is possible to step off the treadmill and discover a different way of living. Ultimately, the lesson of renunciation is that simplicity is not emptiness. It is fullness of another kind. When the noise of excess falls away, what remains is the beauty of the present moment. The taste of food becomes richer, the sound of birds becomes clearer, the company of loved ones becomes more precious. Life itself becomes enough. This is the freedom that renunciation offers. It is not the absence of life, but the rediscovery of life in its purest form. The tree and its environment, nurturing spiritual growth. In many Buddhist teachings, the image of a tree is used to describe human life. A tree does not choose the seed from which it was born, nor does it control the soil into which it first took root. Yet it always has the capacity to grow toward the light, to reach for nourishment, and to adapt to its surroundings. In the same way, each of us inherits circumstances from our families, our cultures, and our histories. We cannot change the starting point, but we can shape the environment that sustains us. The story of the tree teaches us that while we cannot control everything, we can influence enough to create growth, resilience, and peace. Think of a tree planted in difficult soil, perhaps surrounded by rocks or exposed to harsh winds. At first glance, it seems fragile, but with time it learns to adapt. Its roots dig deeper in search of water. Its trunk bends to survive storms. Its branches reach toward the sun. Human beings are no different. Many grow up in environments filled with stress, trauma, or scarcity. Others inherit patterns of anger, fear, or confusion. These conditions shape us, but they do not define us forever. Like the tree, we can seek nourishment, stretch toward healing, and create new conditions that allow growth. In the modern West, the concept of nurturing environment is especially important. Many people assume that peace must be found within, regardless of circumstances. And while inner work is essential, the environment plays a powerful role. What we consume, who we surround ourselves with, and the spaces we inhabit all shape our mental and spiritual health. Just as a tree cannot thrive in toxic soil, a human being cannot thrive in an environment filled with constant negativity. This does not mean we must wait for the perfect surroundings to begin our practice. It means we can make intentional choices that improve the soil in which our lives grow. Consider the influence of media. Hours spent absorbing anger, fear, and comparison through news or social platforms feed the poisons of craving, anger, and ignorance. It is like pouring chemicals into the soil of the mind. Over time, the roots weaken. On the other hand, choosing content that inspires, uplifts, and educates enriches the soil. The mind becomes stronger, more stable, and more compassionate. Every click is a choice of nourishment. Just as a tree absorbs water and sunlight, we absorb the energy of what we expose ourselves to. Relationships are another form of environment. Some relationships nurture growth, offering encouragement, honesty, and kindness. Others drain energy, feeding insecurity and fear. When we choose to spend more time with those who uplift us, we are like a tree planted by a clear stream. When we remain constantly surrounded by toxic influences, we are like a tree in a drought. The difference in growth is dramatic. This does not mean abandoning everyone who struggles. Compassion calls us to support others, but wisdom asks us to protect our roots. Just as a healthy tree can provide shade and fruit, a healthy person can provide more to others when they are nourished themselves. The physical environment also matters. A cluttered, chaotic space mirrors and reinforces a cluttered mind. A simple, clean, and welcoming space creates conditions for calm. This is why monasteries are often designed with such attention to simplicity. It is not about austerity, but about creating surroundings that support clarity. For people in cities across America, Canada, and Europe, where noise and rush are constant, even small acts of creating peaceful environments can have profound effects. A corner with a candle and a cushion, a walk through a quiet park, or a few minutes tending a plant can shift the atmosphere of the mind. The image of the tree also reminds us that growth is not always visible on the surface. Sometimes the tree appears still, but underground, the roots are spreading. In human life, this means that even when we feel stagnant, small changes are happening beneath awareness. Choosing healthier food, practicing mindful breathing, or pausing before reacting may not show dramatic results immediately. But over time, these choices strengthen the roots. Later, when storms come, the tree that has deepened its roots will stand. The person who has built quiet habits of awareness will endure. Another lesson from the tree is patience. No tree grows overnight. It takes seasons of rain and sun, years of slow expansion. Human growth is the same. In a culture that celebrates instant results, it can be frustrating to walk a path of gradual transformation. Yet the wisdom of the tree reminds us that deep growth cannot be rushed. We must allow time for healing, time for new habits to take root, time for the branches of our character to expand. The very slowness of growth is what makes it enduring. At the same time, a tree is never completely isolated. It exists within an ecosystem. It exchanges oxygen and carbon dioxide with the air. It shares nutrients with neighboring trees through underground networks. It provides shelter for birds and animals. In the same way, human beings are not separate individuals living in isolation. Our well-being affects and is affected by others. When we nurture ourselves, we contribute to the health of our families and communities. When we create environments of peace, we make it easier for others to find peace too. Spiritual growth is both personal and communal. One powerful way to understand this is through the idea of spiritual nutrition. Just as physical health depends on food and water, spiritual health depends on what we take in through our senses and minds. The conversations we engage in, the art we consume, the silence we allow, all feed the spirit. If we constantly consume anger, fear, and distraction, the spirit becomes malnourished. If we intentionally feed on kindness, wisdom, and beauty, the spirit flourishes. This does not mean avoiding all difficulty. Storms strengthen the tree as well. It means ensuring that what we take in sustains rather than depletes. For audiences in modern Western countries, this teaching is a reminder of choice. While we cannot always change the larger world, we can shape our immediate environment. We can choose what media to consume, what relationships to nurture, what spaces to inhabit. We can decide whether to live as a tree planted in fertile soil or as one struggling in a barren field. Each choice creates conditions that either support or hinder growth. Let us imagine two different mornings. In one, a person wakes, immediately scrolls through a flood of alarming headlines and curated social media posts. They rush through breakfast, already filled with anxiety and comparison. In the other, a person wakes, takes a few breaths, looks at the morning light, and reads something nourishing before beginning the day. Both live in the same city, face similar challenges, and yet their experiences of life diverge dramatically. One has chosen soil filled with toxins, the other soil enriched with clarity and calm. The difference in their growth over months and years will be profound. The tree and its environment teach us responsibility. We may not control the seed we were born from, but we can choose how we nurture it. We may not prevent every storm, but we can strengthen our roots. We may not stop the changing seasons, but we can reach toward the light. By tending carefully to our environment, we create conditions where the poisons of craving, anger, and ignorance lose power, and where the powers of compassion, wisdom, and letting go thrive. In the end, the lesson is simple. Just as a tree grows toward the sun, we can grow toward peace. Just as a tree depends on its environment, we depend on what we take in and what we surround ourselves with. The question we must ask ourselves each day is this: what kind of soil am I planting my life in? When the soil is rich with kindness, patience, and awareness, our lives bear fruit, not only for ourselves, but for all who share the shade of our branches. The digital age and collective responsibility. As we look at the world today, it is impossible to ignore the immense influence of the digital age. Never before have human beings been so connected, so surrounded by streams of information, and so capable of shaping each other's perceptions in real time. The internet, social media, and global communication networks have become the soil in which modern life grows. Just as a tree depends on its environment, our digital environment now plays a central role in shaping who we are. This brings with it both extraordinary opportunities and serious challenges. In earlier times, an individual's influence was limited to their immediate community. Words spoken reached only those within earshot. Actions affected mainly neighbors and family. Today, a single comment, photo, or video can ripple across continents in moments. This reality carries a new kind of responsibility. What we say, share, and amplify contributes to the collective environment of humanity. We are no longer only tending to our personal soil, we are feeding the soil of the entire forest. The challenge is that the digital environment is often saturated with the very poisons we explored earlier. Craving is amplified through endless advertisements, promising happiness with the next product. Anger is fueled by divisive headlines, designed to provoke outrage and engagement. Ignorance spreads easily, as misinformation circulates unchecked, creating confusion about truth. If we are not mindful, participating in this environment can pull us deeper into suffering. Yet with awareness, we can also transform it. We can choose to share wisdom rather than fear, compassion rather than hate, clarity rather than confusion. Imagine opening your phone first thing in the morning. One version of the day begins with scrolling through angry debates, shocking news, and polished images of other people's lives. Already the mind is restless, comparing, judging, grasping. Another version of the day begins with a moment of pause. Instead of reacting immediately, you choose to share a kind word with a friend, post something encouraging, or simply read something nourishing. In this version, the digital space becomes not a source of agitation but a vehicle for peace. The difference lies not in the technology itself, but in how we use it. For people in Europe, America, and Canada, this responsibility feels especially urgent because digital platforms dominate daily life. Work, relationships, entertainment, and even spirituality now flow through screens. While this brings convenience, it also blurs the line between what is real and what is constructed. Many struggle with the pressure to maintain an image online, curating lives that appear perfect while privately battling loneliness or insecurity. This pressure reflects the trap of possession and ego in a new form. It is not only objects we cling to, but digital identities. The more tightly we hold them, the more fragile we feel. Buddhist wisdom offers a remedy by inviting us to treat digital participation as practice. Each click, each comment, each post is an opportunity to cultivate awareness. Before reacting to a post with anger, pause and ask, is this response feeding peace or fueling division? Before sharing an article, ask, is this truth or is it confusion? Before comparing your life to a polished image, remind yourself that no picture captures the whole story. These small moments of mindfulness transform the digital environment. Just as one tree can purify the air around it, one mindful person can uplift the space they touch online. Collective responsibility extends beyond individual choices. Just as trees in a forest share nutrients through underground networks, humans in the digital world create networks of energy. If the network is filled with fear and hostility, the whole forest suffers. If it is enriched with compassion and understanding, the whole forest thrives. Every message we send, every idea we amplify, contributes to the climate of our shared world. This means that each person, no matter how small they feel, holds power. A kind comment can ripple outward. A truthful post can counter misinformation. A compassionate perspective can soften conflict. We often underestimate this power because it is not always visible. A single tree does not see the entire forest changing because of its oxygen, yet the effect is real. In the same way, we may not see the immediate results of sharing kindness online, but the influence accumulates. One person feels seen, then treats another with care, and the ripple spreads. The responsibility of the digital age is to remember that what we feed into the system shapes not only our own minds, but the minds of countless others. This perspective also reframes freedom. Many think freedom online means the right to say anything without consequence. But true freedom in the Buddhist sense is not the ability to act without limits. It is the ability to act with wisdom, compassion, and letting go. When we release the need to dominate or prove ourselves, we discover a deeper freedom, the freedom to contribute positively to the collective. This freedom is not about self-expression alone, but about shared well-being. Practical steps for this responsibility include creating intentional boundaries. Just as we protect our physical environment by choosing clean water and healthy food, we can protect our digital environment by choosing what we consume. Limiting time on platforms that provoke comparison, curating feeds to include voices of wisdom, and practicing digital silence when needed are all forms of renunciation. They remind us that we are not helpless in the face of digital overload. We can shape our environment in ways that nurture peace. Another step is remembering balance. Just as a tree must balance sunlight and shade, humans must balance online and offline life. Digital connection is powerful, but without grounding in real relationships and physical presence, it becomes hollow. Walking in nature, sitting with loved ones, and experiencing silence are forms of balance that restore authenticity. They prevent us from being swallowed by digital identities and remind us of what is real. Collective responsibility also calls us to think about future generations. Just as trees plant seeds that will grow long after they are gone, our digital choices leave legacies. The culture we create online will shape the minds of children who inherit it. If we fill it with anger and division, they will grow up in poisoned soil. If we fill it with wisdom and compassion, they will inherit fertile ground for peace. This awareness transforms digital practice from personal convenience into communal duty. In Western societies, where individualism is highly valued, the concept of collective responsibility can feel challenging, yet the digital age makes it unavoidable. We are interconnected in ways that transcend borders and cultures. The choices of one person in New York can influence someone in Berlin. A message shared in Toronto can affect a reader in Paris. Recognizing this interconnectedness is both humbling and empowering. It means we are never truly alone, and it means our actions always matter. The ultimate lesson of the digital age is that we are all gardeners of the shared forest. Every post is a seed. Every comment is water or poison. Every choice shapes the climate of our collective world. By approaching digital life with mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom, we participate in creating an environment where peace can grow. In the end, The responsibility of the digital age is not a burden but a gift. It allows us to realize the profound impact of small actions. It invites us to see ourselves not just as consumers of information, but as creators of culture. It challenges us to rise above the poisons of craving, anger, and ignorance, and instead cultivate compassion, wisdom, and letting go in the very spaces where they are most needed. The digital world may be vast and noisy, but every tree in the forest matters, and so does every voice. Together, we can create an environment that nourishes not only ourselves but generations to come. Conclusion: the call to live with awareness. As we bring this journey to a close, it is clear that the teachings we have explored are not distant philosophies or abstract doctrines. They are living practices that touch every moment of modern life. We began by recognizing that the ordinary routines we often dismiss can become the ground of transformation. Washing dishes, waiting in traffic, listening to a child's voice. These are not interruptions to our practice. They are the practice itself. From there, we discovered the three spiritual powers: compassion, wisdom, and letting go. Together, they form a foundation of freedom that no possession or achievement can provide. We also confronted the traps of accumulation and the culture of more. In a world that constantly tells us to strive for the next upgrade, the next title, the next recognition, we learned that peace does not come from addition but from subtraction. By releasing what we do not need, we create space for what truly matters. Then we looked closely at the three poisons: craving, anger, and ignorance, and saw how they quietly infiltrate our daily lives. The antidote is not repression but awareness, the gentle recognition that breaks their grip. The journey continued through the lesson of possession and ego. We saw how ownership, whether of objects or ideas, often fuses with identity and traps us in fragile roles. By loosening that grip, we recover the freedom to live authentically. The story of renunciation reminded us that simplicity is not emptiness but fullness of another kind. By letting go of excess, we rediscover joy in presence. The metaphor of the tree and its environment showed us the importance of nurturing soil. Just as a tree thrives in fertile ground, we thrive when we choose nourishing media, uplifting relationships, and balanced spaces. Finally, we arrived at the digital age, where collective responsibility has become unavoidable. In this vast forest of connection, every comment and every post is a seed. What we share shapes not only our own minds, but the collective mind of humanity. The call is clear. We are invited to participate consciously, to choose compassion over cruelty, clarity over confusion, and presence over distraction. The question that remains is simple. What will you do with this understanding? It is not enough to admire these teachings from a distance. They come alive only when lived. Tonight, tomorrow, and in the days to come, you have countless opportunities to practice. You can choose patience in a moment of frustration. You can release one possession or one opinion that weighs you down. You can share a word of kindness online instead of fueling division. You can pause, breathe, and discover that peace is already here. This is the call to action. Do not wait for perfect conditions or distant retreats. Begin where you are. Begin with the next breath, the next word, the next choice. Each small act of awareness ripples outward, shaping not only your own life but the world we all share. In a culture that celebrates more, dare to honor enough. In a world filled with noise, dare to cultivate silence. In a time of division, dare to embody compassion. The teachings we have explored are ancient, yet they speak directly to the challenges of today. They remind us that freedom is not a reward waiting in the future. It is a possibility available now. All that is required is the courage to let go, the clarity to see, and the compassion to care. May you carry these truths into your daily life, not as heavy burdens but as guiding lights. And may your presence, like a strong and steady tree, offer shade, nourishment, and peace to everyone around you.